14th of August, 2004. Oakley Manor Amusement Park in the county of Surrey, England. 16-year-old Hayley Williams is hanging upside down at a height of 26 meters. Her legs are trapped between the rail and the car of the tragedy ride. Blood rushes to her head. She screams, but the wind carries the sound away. Rescuers will reach her only after 4.5 hours. By that point, the pressure in the blood vessels of her brain will reach a critical level. But this is only 20 points on our scale of horror. The maximum is 150. Stay until the end to find out which roller coaster disaster reaches that mark. I warn you, this material is not for the faint-hearted. We begin. 9th of May, 1984. Coney Island Amusement Park, New York. A warm spring evening. The air temperature is 21 degrees Celsius. Thousands of people stroll along the boardwalk, eating hot dogs, laughing. The Thunderbolt ride, a wooden roller coaster built back in 1925, has been running without a break for 6 hours straight. The wooden beams of the structure are nearly 60 years old. The last major overhaul was carried out in 1972. Since then, only cosmetic touch-ups and replacement of individual boards. The New York State inspection checked the ride in March. The report stated, fit for operation. At 19 hours 42 minutes, a group of 12 people boards the Thunderbolt. Among them is 32-year-old Edward Rickman, a construction worker from Brooklyn. He came with his wife and 2 daughters. The younger one, Sarah, is 7 years old. She sits next to her father in the third car. The train begins its ascent. The chain mechanism pulls the cars up the first hill. Height, 27 meters. At the top, a brief pause, then the drop. Speed at the lowest point reaches 80 kilometers per hour. But on this evening, the train does not reach the top. At a height of 22 meters, a cracking sound rings out. A wooden support that had held the rail for 59 years snaps. The rail sags 40 centimeters to the right. The cars, moving upward along the incline, lose their guide rail. The chain mechanism continues to pull. The first car derails. Imagine this. You are sitting in an open car. Below you, 22 meters of empty space. The metal frame to which your seat is attached tilts to the right. You hear a grinding screech. You feel your body beginning to slide. The restraint bar, a simple metal crossbar at hip level, is the only thing holding you in. Edward Rickman instinctively wrapped both arms around Sarah. He pressed her against himself. The car stopped. The chain mechanism jammed. The train hung on the deformed rail at an angle of 35 degrees. 4 people from the first car fell out. 2 of them, a 28-year-old man and a 41-year-old woman, fell from a height of 19 meters onto the wooden decking of the structure. The man died instantly. The woman sustained a spinal fracture in 3 places, a pelvic fracture, and a ruptured spleen. She died in hospital 11 hours later. 2 others caught hold of structural elements. One of them, a 17-year-old teenager, hung from a wooden beam for 40 minutes until firefighters brought him down using an aerial ladder. Edward and Sarah Rickman remained in the car for 2 hours and 20 minutes. The entire time, the father held his daughter. When they were brought down, doctors discovered that the muscles in his arms were in a state of severe spasm. He could not unclench his fingers for another 3 days. The investigation showed the wooden support had been affected by fungus across 70% of its cross-section. The inspector who signed the certificate of fitness had examined the structure from the ground. He did not climb up. He did not tap the beams. He did not take wood samples. 1 person died. 1 died in hospital. 6 sustained injuries of varying severity. The park paid a fine of $50,000. The ride was demolished in 1986. On the scale of horror, 25 points. Death was swift. A fall from 19 meters lasts less than 2 seconds. The brain does not have time to comprehend, but there are accidents where the victims were fully conscious for considerably longer. 11th of June, 2001, Lightwater Valley Amusement Park, County of North Yorkshire, England. The tragedy ride, steel roller coasters with 2 loops and a maximum speed of 88 kilometers per hour. The height of the main drop, 30 meters. 20-year-old engineering student Richard Hamilton came to the park with friends. He sat in the last car. The operator checked the restraint bars, pressed the start button. On the first ascent, everything was normal. The train climbed to 30 meters. It began the descent. Speed increased. 80 kilometers per hour. The first loop, G-force, 4.5 units. Richard's body was pressed into the seat. Then, the second loop. And here something occurred that engineers would later call a cascading failure. The restraint bar at Richard's seat had not been fully secured. The lock had engaged at the first of 3 locking levels. For a person of average build, this is sufficient under normal G-forces. But Richard was slender. His height, 188 centimeters, his weight, 68 kilograms. Between his body and the bar, there remained a gap of 12 centimeters. At the entry to the second loop, the train was traveling upside down. Negative G-force, minus 1.5 units. Richard's body was pulled downward, that is, toward the ground. The bar held his hips, but his torso and head slipped out from under the restraint. His body hung from the car at a height of 25 meters. He clung to the bar with his hands. The train continued moving. Speed, 60 kilometers per hour. Ahead, a turn, then another ascent, then the braking section. Richard did not make it to the braking section. On the turn, centrifugal force tore him from the car. He flew 11 meters horizontally. He struck a steel support of the structure. Then he fell onto the concrete base from a height of approximately 8 meters. Paramedics pronounced death at the scene. Cause, multiple injuries incompatible with life. The investigation established the ride operator that day had been working his 12th consecutive hour. He checked the bars visually without pulling each one by hand. An automatic restraint verification system existed, but had been disabled 3 weeks earlier due to false activations. The park manager knew about this. He signed the order to disable it. Richard Hamilton hung from the arm for approximately 7 to 8 seconds. He was conscious. He understood what was happening. Witnesses in the following train saw him trying to pull himself back up. 7 seconds of absolute terror. The understanding of the inevitable. Hands growing weaker. Wind beating against his face. And a steel support drawing closer. On the scale of horror, 40 points. Time of awareness, greater. Suffering, conscious, and yet there are cases where the agony lasted not seconds, but hours. 2nd of August, 2007. Fuji-Q Highland Amusement Park, Yamanashi Prefecture, Japan. The Fujiyama ride, at that time one of the tallest roller coasters in the world. Height of the first drop, 79 meters. Maximum speed, 130 kilometers per hour. Track length, 2,045 meters. 45-year-old Yukiko Tanaka, a housewife from Tokyo, came to the park with her husband and 13-year-old son. She was afraid of heights. Her husband talked her into it. Later, he would repeat this phrase in every interview. I talked her into it. Yukiko sat in the second car. The operator lowered the restraint system, shoulder harnesses with an automatic lock. Everything engaged. The system showed a green signal. The train set off. The ascent to 79 meters takes approximately 2 minutes. Yukiko gripped the handrails. Her husband, sitting beside her, later recounted. She closed her eyes and was whispering something. At the top, up, a 1-second pause, then the drop, nearly vertical. Angle, 65 degrees. G-force at the lowest point, 3.5 units. The problem was not with the construction. The problem was with Yukiko's body. She had an undiagnosed cerebral aneurysm. The wall of an artery in her brain was thinner than paper. She had lived with it for years without knowing. Millions of people live with this without knowing. At a G-force of 3.5 units, blood pressure in the brain's vessels increases proportionally. The thin wall of the aneurysm could not withstand it. A rupture occurred. Blood flooded into the brain tissue. Yukiko lost consciousness on the 3rd second of the descent. She did not feel the remaining 2 minutes and 40 seconds of the ride. When the train returned to the station, her husband saw that she was not moving. Her head was thrown back. From her mouth, a thin trickle of saliva. The ambulance arrived in 9 minutes. Yukiko was taken to Fuji Yoshida Hospital. A neurosurgeon performed an emergency craniotomy. The hematoma in the left hemisphere occupied an area the size of a man's fist. Yukiko lived for another 14 hours. She never regained consciousness. This case stands apart. Yukiko did not become a victim of a technical malfunction. She became a victim of her own physiology, multiplied by extreme G-forces. The park was not at fault. The manufacturer was not at fault. Nobody was at fault. And this is perhaps the most terrifying thing, when there is no one to blame, yet a person is dead. On the scale of horror, 30 points. Yukiko herself did not suffer. She lost consciousness instantly. But the horror of this case lies in its unpredictability. Any one of us may carry a bomb inside and not know it. However, the next disaster is no longer a matter of bad luck. This is criminal negligence multiplied by greed, and the victims will number more than one. 11th of July, 1981. Battersea Amusement Park, London, England. The Big Dipper Ride, a wooden roller coaster built in 1951. Track length, 610 meters. Maximum speed, 65 kilometers per hour. The day was hot, 28 degrees Celsius. The park was overcrowded. The queue for the Big Dipper stretched to 40 minutes. The ride operator, 23-year-old Stephen Prescott, was working his first season. His training had lasted 3 days. At 14 hours, 17 minutes, a train of 5 cars boarded the ride. 24 passengers, among them 4 children aged from 5 to 9 years old. The train began its ascent. At the top of the first hill, Stephen was supposed to ensure that the braking mechanism on the descent was activated. This was a manual lever in the operator's cabin. Stephen pulled the lever. The lever jammed. He pulled harder. The lever shifted, but not all the way. The indicator showed yellow, an intermediate position. Green meant full activation. Red, deactivation. Yellow, uncertainty. Stephen did not know what to do with a yellow signal. In his 3-day training, this scenario had not been covered. He did not press the emergency stop button. He did not call the senior operator on the radio. He decided that yellow was close enough to green. The train went down. The braking mechanism on the descent consisted of a system of metal plates that pressed against the rail from underneath the cars. At full activation, they reduced speed from 65 to 20 kilometers per hour before the first turn. At the intermediate lever position, they pressed with a force of 40% of the design value. The train entered the first turn at a speed of 52 kilometers per hour instead of the design 20. Centrifugal force exceeded the permissible level by 2.5 times. The last car broke free from the rail. It flew 3 meters through the air and struck the wooden barrier of the track. The barrier collapsed. The car fell to the ground from a height of 7 meters. 5 people were sitting in it. 3 of them were children. 5-year-old Sean McGuire died instantly, a fracture of the base of the skull. His mother, 30-year-old Catherine, sustained fractures of both legs, broken ribs, and a punctured lung. She survived but spent 4 months in hospital. The other 2 children, a brother and sister, 8 and 9 years old, sustained multiple fractures and concussion. The 5th passenger, a 52-year-old man, broke his spine. He remained paralyzed below the waist for the rest of his life. Stephen Prescott was convicted of involuntary manslaughter. He received a 2-year suspended sentence. The park owner paid compensation totaling £1,200,000 sterling. Battersea Park closed in 1986. At the trial, it emerged. The lever had jammed before, at least 3 times during the previous season. Each time, the senior operator simply hit it with a hammer. Nobody called a repair crew. Nobody filed a report. Nobody notified the inspectorate. The death of a 5-year-old child because someone did not want to fix a lever. On the scale of horror, 55 points. Not for the physical suffering, Sean died instantly. For the absolute preventability. For the fact that adults responsible for children's safety made a choice. And that choice killed a child. And yet you do not need to go back to the 80s to find such negligence. The 21st century has provided us with cases no less monstrous. 9th of June, 2001. Six Flags Kentucky Kingdom Amusement Park, Louisville, State of Kentucky, United States. The Thunder Run Ride, suspended steel roller coasters. Passengers sit in open seats suspended beneath the rail. Legs hang freely, maximum speed 85 kilometers per hour. A 13-year-old girl whose name the court prohibited from disclosing sat in a seat together with her friend. The operator lowered the restraint bar. The automatic lock clicked. The train completed the entire course without incident. During the final braking, the bar on the girl's seat opened spontaneously. At that moment, the seat was passing through the last turn at a speed of approximately 30 kilometers per hour. The girl slipped out of the seat and fell onto a concrete platform from a height of 6 meters. She survived. But the list of her injuries fills 1.5 pages of the medical report. Skull fracture, fractures of both arms, pelvic fracture, kidney damage, brain contusion. She underwent 6 operations over 4 months. She had to learn to walk again. She was 13 years old. The investigation established the restraint bar lock had a manufacturing defect. The latch spring was shorter by 2 millimeters than specified in the design documentation. 2 millimeters. Under certain vibrations, the lock could open spontaneously. The manufacturer knew about this. 8 months before the incident, it had sent a service bulletin to all parks operating this ride, recommending replacement of the springs. Six Flags Kentucky Kingdom received this bulletin. It was filed in a folder. The springs were not replaced. 2 millimeters, one sheet of paper, filed in a folder and forgotten. And a 13-year-old girl who has to learn to walk again. On the scale of horror, 60 points. But we have not even reached half the scale. Ahead, disasters that changed the industry forever. Disasters where the victim count ran into the dozens. Where bodies were found hundreds of meters from the ride. Where fire, water, and steel combined into a perfect storm. 9th of May, 1984, a date we have already mentioned. But that same year, 3 months later, something considerably worse occurred. On another continent, in a country where safety standards existed only on paper. 26th of August, 1984, a traveling amusement park on the outskirts of New Delhi, India. The name of the ride was not preserved in official documents. It was simply called the Big Slide, a steel structure assembled from sections that were transported on lorries from city to city. The structure had been manufactured in 1971. The original owner operated it for 9 years, then sold it. The second owner, another 4 years. By 1984, the ride had changed hands 5 times. Each owner cut costs on maintenance. The technical documentation was lost after the third owner. Nobody knew the exact design load capacity of the structure. On that day, 2 trains were loaded onto the ride simultaneously. This was prohibited by the design. The track had only 1 braking zone, but 2 trains meant twice as many tickets per hour, and tickets meant money. The first train completed the course and began braking. The second train was launched 30 seconds later. The operator calculated that the first would have time to stop and clear the braking zone before the second arrived. It did not. The second train entered the braking zone at a speed of approximately 70 kilometers per hour and slammed into the rear of the first. The impact was so powerful that the last 2 cars of the first train were crushed like aluminum cans. The front cars of the second train rose upward and flew over the wreckage. The official death toll, 17 people. The unofficial figure, according to local journalists, from 22 to 30. The exact number is unknown because the park kept no record of passengers. Tickets were sold without numbering. No passenger list existed. Among the dead, at least 6 children. Their bodies were extracted from the crushed metal over the course of 4 hours. Rescue equipment arrived only after 1 hour and 40 minutes. The nearest fire station was 28 kilometers away. A harrowing detail of this story: some passengers of the first train were alive after the collision, trapped in the deformed cars. They screamed. They called for help. People around them tried to bend the metal with their bare hands. Without tools, without equipment, without training, they could do nothing. One man, his name was not preserved, was trapped between the seat and the car frame. A steel pipe had gone through his thigh. He was conscious. He spoke with rescuers. He asked for water. He waited 2 hours. When he was finally extracted, he died from blood loss 20 minutes later on the way to hospital. The owner of the ride fled that same night. He was found 3 years later in another state. He was running another traveling park, with other rides, with the same safety standards. On the scale of horror, 75 points for the number of victims, for the complete absence of a safety system, for the fact that people died slowly, consciously, waiting for help that was late. And yet this is not the maximum, because there exists a type of roller coaster accident that is more terrifying than a collision, more terrifying than a fall, more terrifying even than a slow death while waiting for rescuers. It is fire. 11th of May, 1984. Six Flags Great Adventure Amusement Park, Jackson, State of New Jersey, United States. The Haunted Castle Ride, a haunted house. Formally, this is not a roller coaster, but the attraction included a rail system along which cars carrying passengers moved through dark corridors. The cars held 4 people each. They moved slowly at approximately 5 kilometers per hour through a labyrinth of rooms with frightening decorations. The walls were lined with foam, rubber, and fabric. The ceilings were suspended, made of polyethylene film. On all of this, highly flammable materials. A fire alarm system in the building was absent. A sprinkler system was absent. Emergency exits formerly existed but were blocked so that visitors would not use them as regular exits. At 21 hours 15 minutes, a group of teenagers passing through the attraction on foot, in certain zones this was permitted, lit a lighter to see the way in the darkness. The flame touched the foam rubber lining of the wall. The foam rubber ignited instantly. The fire spread to the fabric decorations, then to the polyethylene ceiling. Within 30 seconds, the entire corridor was ablaze. Within 60 seconds, the temperature in the room reached 400 degrees Celsius. 29 people were inside the building, some in the cars, some on foot. Visibility dropped to 0 within seconds. Thick black smoke from the burning foam rubber. This smoke contained hydrogen cyanide and carbon monoxide. 1 breath, and a person lost the ability to orient themselves. 2 breaths, loss of consciousness. 3, death. 8 teenagers between the ages of 15 and 20 died. Their bodies were found in a corridor 12 meters long, leading to an emergency exit. The emergency exit door was locked with a padlock. From the outside, 8 people stood before a locked door, breathing toxic smoke. They pounded on the door. They screamed. On the other side of the door, fresh air and life. Between them, 1 padlock. When firefighters broke through the door, they found 8 bodies lying on top of one another. Those who had been standing closest to the door fell first. The concentration of smoke was higher near the ceiling, and the door was low, so the smoke accumulated right there. The others fell on top of them. Identifying the bodies took several days. The fire had disfigured them beyond recognition. Parents identified their children by jewelry, clothing, dental records. Six Flags Park paid a fine. Criminal charges were filed, but the court acquitted the management. Acquitted. 8 dead teenagers, and a not guilty verdict. It simply breaks your heart. On the horror scale, 90 points for the manner of death. Suffocation by toxic smoke is one of the most agonizing deaths. The brain remains active for another 30 to 40 seconds after the lungs stop receiving oxygen. The person feels themselves suffocating. They feel panic. They feel chest pain, and they know the door is right in front of them, but it is locked. 30 to 40 seconds of conscious agony before a locked door. However, this is not the top of the scale. We are approaching it, but we have not yet reached it. The next case occurred in a country where roller coasters are not just entertainment, but a national obsession, where rides are built higher, faster, and more extreme than anywhere else in the world, and where one accident claimed more lives than any other in the history of the industry. May 1st, 1999, Ocean Park Amusement Park, Hong Kong. The Space Mountain Ride, an enclosed roller coaster located inside a building. Complete darkness. Speed up to 60 kilometers per hour. The track included sharp turns and 2 drops with G-forces up to 4. But the accident was not caused by speed or G-forces. It was caused by water. 2 days before May 1st, Hong Kong experienced torrential rains. Over 48 hours, 122 millimeters of precipitation fell. The building housing the ride had a flat roof. The roof's drainage system was designed for 80 millimeters of precipitation per day. It could not cope. Water accumulated on the roof. The weight of a water layer 4 centimeters thick over an area of 2,000 square meters was approximately 80 tons. The roof began to sag. The metal support beams deformed. One of them, a load-bearing beam supporting a section of track at a height of 15 meters, shifted 7 centimeters downward. 7 centimeters, invisible to the naked eye, fatal for a train traveling at 60 kilometers per hour. The train with 20 passengers entered the deformed section. The front wheels hit the displaced rail. The car was thrown upward. The rear wheels lost contact. The train derailed at a height of 15 meters in complete darkness. The passengers could not see anything. They felt an impact, then a fall, then another impact. The train crashed onto the concrete floor. The first two cars were completely destroyed. 2 people died on the spot. 12 sustained severe injuries. 6 sustained moderate injuries. All 20 passengers were hurt. The rescue operation in complete darkness inside the collapsed building took 3 hours. Rescuers worked with flashlights, making their way through structural debris and water that had poured from the roof. The water level on the floor reached 20 centimeters. People with fractures lay in that water. One woman, a 37-year-old nurse whose name has not been disclosed, was pinned under a piece of the car. A steel frame weighing approximately 120 kilograms lay on her chest. She could breathe, but only shallowly. Every breath was a struggle. Rescuers could not lift the frame without hydraulic tools. The tools arrived 1 hour and 20 minutes later. For 1 hour and 20 minutes, she lay in cold water, in complete darkness, with metal on her chest, taking small, agonizing breaths. She was conscious the entire time. She spoke with a rescuer who held her hand. She survived, but 3 of her ribs were broken, and her left lung was punctured by a rib fragment. She spent 11 days in intensive care. On the horror scale, 110 points. For the combination of factors, darkness, water, inability to move, conscious waiting, pain with every breath. And for the scale, 20 injured, 2 dead, 3 hours of rescue operations. We are approaching the top of the scale. 2 cases remain. The second to last, 130 points. The last, 150. And I want you to understand what comes next. I hesitated for a long time about including in this account. But you have made it to this point. That means you are ready. June 26, 2016. Dreamworld Amusement Park, Gold Coast, Australia. The Thunder River Rapids Ride, a water ride simulating whitewater rafting. Round inflatable rafts seating 6 people moved along a concrete water channel. Speed was low, about 15 kilometers per hour. The ride was considered family-friendly. Children as young as 2 were allowed on it when accompanied by adults. The conveyor mechanism that lifted the rafts to the starting point had been malfunctioning intermittently for several weeks. On June 25th, the day before the disaster, it stopped twice. A technician inspected the mechanism and concluded the problem was a sensor. He replaced the sensor. The problem was not the sensor. The problem was the pump supplying water to the channel. The pump was operating at variable power. Sometimes the water level in the channel dropped by 8 to 10 centimeters. At normal levels, the rafts passed freely through all sections of the course. At reduced levels, they could get stuck in shallow areas. On June 26th at 2:20 in the afternoon, 2 rafts entered the course 30 seconds apart. In the first, 4 people. In the second, 6. Midway through the course, the water level dropped. The first raft got stuck on a shallow section. The second raft, following behind, could not stop. It was carried by the current. It slammed into the first. Upon collision, the first raft flipped over. 4 people ended up in the water. The depth at that point was 80 centimeters. You would think, just stand up and walk, but the conveyor mechanism kept running. The metal blades of the conveyor, located underwater, grabbed everything that came within their reach. 2 of the 4, 42-year-old Kate Goodchild and her 32-year-old brother, Luke Dorset, were dragged under the conveyor. The mechanism, weighing several tons, pinned them to the concrete bottom of the channel. The water kept flowing. Their heads were underwater. The other 2, 35-year-old Ruzi Turner and 42-year-old Cindy Lowe, died from injuries inflicted by the conveyor mechanism. The details of those injuries I cannot describe. The photographs from the scene I also cannot show. I will only say that the coroner used the phrase, incompatible with life. 4 people. 2 of them, biological brother and sister. Kate left behind 2 children, 12 and 10 years old. They were at the park that day. They were waiting for their mother at the ride's exit. The investigation lasted 2 years. It established that Dreamworld had systematically ignored malfunctions of the ride for at least 5 years. An emergency conveyor stop system existed but required manual activation by the operator. The operator that day, a young woman of 21, had not been trained in emergency procedures. She pressed the stop button 45 seconds after the collision. 45 seconds. In that time, the conveyor completed several full rotations. That was enough. Dreamworld was fined 750,000 Australian dollars. The ride was demolished. The families of the deceased filed civil lawsuits. The compensation amounts have not been disclosed. On the horror scale, 130 points for the mechanism of death. Being dragged under a running conveyor, pinned to concrete, with water over your head, that is a combination of drowning, crushing, and mechanical injuries all at once. The victim's brain is active for the first 60 to 90 seconds. The person feels pressure on their chest, feels water in their lungs, feels the mechanism moving across their body, and can do nothing. But that is 130, not 150. The maximum mark on our scale belongs to a disaster you most likely have never heard of. It did not happen at a famous park, not in a developed country, and the number of its victims is still not precisely known. But the most terrifying thing is not the number of victims, it is how exactly they died. February 14th, 1972. A traveling fairground park in the city of Batala, Punjab State, India. A ride with no official name, locals called it the Death Loop, a steel structure with one vertical loop. The height of the loop, 18 meters. A car seating 12 people, propelled by gravity from an initial descent. The structure was homemade. It was not manufactured in a factory. It was welded from steel pipes by a local craftsman. Blueprints, if they ever existed, have not survived. Structural calculations were not performed. Inspection was not conducted. An operating permit was not requested. On that day, Valentine's Day, although that holiday is not celebrated in India, the fair was packed. It was harvest season. People had money. They wanted entertainment. The car was loaded to full capacity. 12 people. Among them, 5 children and 3 women. The operator, the ride's owner, a man of about 50, released the brake. The car rolled down the initial descent. The calculated speed at the loop's entry should have been no less than 60 kilometers per hour, so that centrifugal force would hold the passengers at the top. The actual speed that day, according to a reconstruction conducted much later, was approximately 50 to 52 kilometers per hour. Why lower than calculated? Because the rail was not lubricated. Because the wheel bearings were worn. Because the car was overloaded. 12 people plus the car itself weighed more than a ton. The car entered the loop, rose to the top, and stopped. Imagine this. You are hanging upside down at a height of 18 meters. The only thing holding you is a metal bar at hip level. The car is not moving. It stands at the top of the loop, and gravity is pulling you down toward the ground, which is 18 meters below your head. There were no safety harnesses, no shoulder restraints, only one bar. The children fell first. Their light bodies were not wedged in as tightly as the adults. They simply slid out. 5 children fell from a height of 18 meters onto the packed earth of the fairground. Then the car shifted. It did not roll forward. It lacked the inertia. It rolled backward, back along the loop, downward, gaining speed. It derailed on the reverse descent. The car with the remaining 7 passengers plummeted from a height of approximately 10 meters to the ground. It flipped over. It crushed people under its own weight. The total number of dead, according to various sources, ranges from 9 to 14. The exact number is unknown. As in the New Delhi case, no passenger records were kept. The names of most victims have not been preserved. The age of the youngest child, presumably 4 years old. The ride's owner was not physically harmed. He was standing below at the base of the loop. He watched the children fall. He watched the car roll backward. He could do nothing. He was tried. The sentence, 7 years of imprisonment. He served 150 points, not for the number of victims, although it is monstrous, not for the negligence, although it is criminal, for the manner, for the sequence. For the fact that the children fell first, one after another, while the adults hung there and watched. For the fact that then the car rolled backward, and those still holding on understood, now they would fall too. For the seconds of waiting between the moment the car stopped at the bump and the moment the first child slipped away. Those seconds are the most terrifying thing. Not the fall, not the impact, but the waiting, the understanding, the impossibility of changing anything. A mother hanging upside down, watching her child slide out from under the bar. She reaches out her hand. She cannot reach. The child falls. She looks down. 18 meters. I cannot show photographs from the scene. They probably do not even exist. In 1972 in rural India, cameras were a rarity, but the testimonies of people standing at the fair that day were recorded by journalists from the local newspaper. One woman said, "I heard the sounds they made when they fell, and I will hear them for the rest of my life." 150 points, the maximum of our scale. 9 disasters, dozens dead, hundreds maimed, thousands of lives changed forever. Each of these stories is not an accident. It is a chain of decisions. Someone did not fix a lever. Someone did not replace a spring. Someone did not climb up the structure to check the beams. Someone locked the emergency exit with a padlock. Someone launched 2 trains simultaneously. Someone welded a loop from pipes without blueprints or calculations. Every time, a human choice. Every time, someone decided it would be fine as is, that they would get lucky, that nothing would happen. And now a question for you. The last time you got on a roller coaster, did you check how your safety restraint latched? Did you tug it with your hand? Or did you trust the operator who may have been working a 12-hour shift and completed 3 days of training? Write in the comments. After this story, will you get on a roller coaster again? Or not? I am genuinely curious. And if you had nerves of steel enough to listen all the way to this moment, subscribe. Stories that keep you up at night come out here every week, without exceptions.